Did you know that we break the universe? It asked. There was no sound left but for us. No light left but for what we could imagine. No heat, no cold. Everything was still. Not a bad place to die. How so? I cleared my throat, ignoring the ache of thirst that had been my constant companion for longer than I could remember now. Water had stopped existing several trillion years ago at least. Energy, it said, we move without having eaten in forever, our muscles contract, our cells synthesize and consume ATP without ever having consumed anything to fuel it. I knew all this, we had both studied ourselves in extreme detail throughout our lives. Through more and less ethical means, but could it really be considered unethical if you were performing experiments on yourself? An equation with energy only on the output. A system without a stopping point. An engine with no end. That's us. I turned towards the voice. Darkness was the only thing that looked back at me. A void more black and more dark than any other human being had ever seen. Would you want an end? I asked. It laughed. We have been here for longer than anyone else could even conceptualize. We watched both of our species evolve until we shared as many characteristics with them as we do with an apple and then watched those species die. I have chased you beyond stars and black holes and nebulae so vast you could spend 10 billion lifetimes wandering and still not see it all, and see it all we did. I have been seeking something that would be my death since this universe was an infant. I am old. I laughed too, though mine sounded much worse, a dry cackle that served only to remind me how long it had been since I'd tasted the sweetness of water. I think I'd do anything to drink just one more time. But would you want an end? It was quiet. For minutes or hours or days or weeks or months or millennia, I don't know. I didn't care. I had time. I had more patience than a mortal being could possibly hope to comprehend. You know what's funny? For the first time, the answer is no. I blinked. I had not expected that. What changed? I could imagine the way it retracted and extended its eye stalks into its strange approximation of a shrug so well that I could nearly see it. It's dark now, and if we're gone, it will stay dark forever. I'm not sure I like that. It will stay dark? What did it? Oh. An engine with no end. I had never even considered that. The slimy bastard was absolutely never going to let me live this down. I barked out a dry laugh. Ha! The snail laughed alongside me. We move, we blink, we produce heat, I started excitedly. We breathe, we speak, we cause motion. It picked up, inserting energy into everything around us. Knocking particles into other particles. Insignificant waves of motion, but eventually there are spots where there are more particles and there are spots where there are less. I breathed in wonder, and those particles begin to pull. Collapsing inwards, coalescing, forming the simplest of bonds, their collective gravity pulling even more particles in. Crushing each other until they start to heat up. And then in an explosion of heat and light, you get a star. An explosion that sends heat and motion and energy rippling out, setting off even more reactions until the universe begins again. It finished. I laughed again, howling my joy into the void, until my stomach ached. It would take a while, uncountable millennia spent in darkness as two tiny specks restarted a system so vast it defied imagination. It took a lot of energy to kickstart a universe. But I had time. I had more patience than a mortal being could possibly hope to comprehend. One day there would be stars again. There would be planets and moons and nebulae so vast you could spend 10 billion lifetimes wandering and still not see it all. One day water would touch my tongue and light would grace my eyes. One day I would breathe real air. One day I would meet the gaze of an old friend. One day. For now I just laughed, pouring sound and movement and energy into the still universe around me. I laughed and laughed and laughed. This is it, the snail says. I turn away from the brilliant light coming from the center of the universe, and stare at the snail I have come to view as my companion these last however many years. It cannot talk. This I know. But what about that which you don't? It asks, its voice much like the one I used to have. Together, we are floating in the nothingness of space, less than a simple arm's reach away from one another. How many times has your hand hovered over me? It asks. Too many to count. Probably as many times as there are stars. As there were stars in the night sky, it corrects and finishes. Look around you. Behind me, there is nothing. Behind the snail, there is nothing. Above or below, there is nothing to look at except, I turn to the brilliant light that is now pulsing, throbbing, seemingly breathing, That. You have witnessed the death of every star, the snail whispers with great awe. With every death your hand lingered ever so close, yet your own fear prevailed. You, who is to be the sole witness of the final death, what have you to be afraid of? I motion around the everlasting black around us, my tears freezing upon their creation and scattering into the nothing, shining like crystals in the expanding light coming from the center of the universe. You may hold on out of fear, the snail says. But what of me? I look at the snail, how it floats there in the nothingness with me. No, no, not with me. But for me. Haven't I been here? It asks, its voice breaking. How much longer must I wait before you realize you are not alone in this? I turn to the center of the universe, its violent beauty expanding towards us from some unknown distance. I do not know how much time it will take to reach us, I do not know what time itself is anymore, but I now know how selfish I have been. Smiling, with tears like comets shooting from my eyes, I turn to the snail, and ask for its forgiveness. But there is no reply. My hands form a cup beneath the snail, and for the first time, I realize how beautiful its shell is. Closing my eyes, we embrace at last.